Welcome to the presentation for the WhereEat application created by Team Enterprise. The members of Team Enterprise are all distance learning students, and I just displayed them here in alphabetical order, but this is actually the order in which we created the flow as you go through the application. So Rebecca Carroll, myself, Marcus Thomas, Caleb Tidwell, and Rachel Rados. And the problem that we wanted to solve with this application was, that conversation that happens by the water cooler at the office or by the cubicles or between a couple on a couch as they decide, what are we going to have for dinner or what are we going to have for lunch? Everybody's hungry, but nobody wants to make decisions. So we wanted to take away that burden of deciding where to eat with the WhereEat Android application. And the technology that we used here included, of course, the Android SDK, but for memory permanence, we used the Firebase NoSQL non-relational database system that Google also manages, and it was a really neat resource for holding and getting information and using a real-time database. We also used the Google Maps API for using a location to give more information and kind of integrate with the services that Android users are already using on their phone. We use Picasso for drawing an animation for our spinner, and we use the Zomato API for connecting to a service, a RESTful API that had restaurant information, addresses, locations, and categories in a way that was very searchable and easy to use. For us, the process of getting together as distance learning students was pretty challenging. So we really had to have a process, and it needed to have tools in place for communicating with each other. One of the tools that we used were Slack, and that we had a Slack account and channel to just kind of go back and forth, talk about things from design elements to errors in the application and solutions and bugs and ways to fix them. We also used GoToMeeting for our live meetings when we had to periodically get together. For task tracking, we used Trello, and this was a really neat tool for us to just kind of see where we were at any given moment. You can see from the screenshot that right now we're working on the presentation and the SRS documentation. And it was also a great way to keep files and resources in one place, or links to those files and resources. You can see on the left, we kept everything from group member info to a link to the prototype to flowcharts that were used and so on. For UX UI prototyping, we use Adobe XD and Adobe AI for the Illustrator for the design of the layout and the UX UI. And these are really great tools for just kind of testing how the functionality was going to fit together, going from page to page and that user interaction before diving into the actual development. And finally, in the actual development, we used Git and GitHub.com to kind of manage the version between the different developers and to do things like collaborate on code, which you'll see later on we did a lot of. So one of the cool things I wanted to mention was one of our members, Marcus, actually created this flow diagram, and that really helped divide up who was going to do what in the application. So we kind of drew out how the user was going to interact with different elements of the app and go back in certain interaction flows. For the division of labor, we divided up into 4 major sections that included login and registration, listing categories and selecting establishments, the spinner to actually decide, and the detail view. Listing, the selection and the spinners were both done by one person, so that's why you see 5 elements instead of 4. For my activity, I did the login and registration activity. And for that, I used Google Firebase, the non-relational database. And this was a really interesting process, just kind of dealing with how a document-based database system works and using that to retain information. So for the login and registration component of the app, you can see here that on the emulator, I am going to go ahead and select the application, WhereEat. And then I'm on the main splash page. And there's an option here to register or to log in. If we went in and we entered information that wasn't actually like legit information, it would give us a little error message down at the bottom. And this is based on interactions with the Firebase database, whether it finds the information or not. So going to the registration page, if we go ahead and enter in the fields there, you can see that we're entering things in, and all of the fields are qualified with what kind of information is going into the field. So if we don't enter in information, it validates and says, no, you can't leave the username blank, like that's not okay. So we can go back and enter in the username here. Now, we also asked our user for their location, which was the idea for this was that in a future version we could use this as like a backup in case the location doesn't work. And go ahead and submitting that takes the user to the login page where they can now enter in their new information. So I'm going to go ahead and enter in the user that I just registered with and log in.
Hello, I'm Marcus Thomas, and I'll be talking about the category activity. This activity uses the Zomato API to get a list of restaurant categories, then allows the user to select which type of restaurant they want to go to. The major problem we faced while developing this activity was actually getting the information off of Zomato servers. To do this, we developed two networking tools. These networking tools, Zomatron and Zomatron Task, allow us to get geographic info for the user, as well as descriptions of various restaurants and categories. The first problem we faced developing these tools was getting the location. This uses a lot of permissions setup, as a location manager class, which is Android's way of getting the longitude and latitude, cannot work unless the user allows it to. The Zomatron class, in addition to getting that location data, also assembles queries to be made to Zomato, hence the name. However, the actual process of getting the answers to these queries via the HTTP URL connection class is necessarily asynchronous, meaning a separate Zomatron class had to be made for the actual processing of the requests.
The next activity is the selection activity. It was made by me, Caleb Tidwell. For this activity, nearby restaurants that match the selected category are retrieved using the Zomato API and displayed. The user can select 2 to 6 restaurants to be placed on the spinner. Here are some details and hurdles I had to overcome to make it work. First, for each restaurant, I needed to display the name, a description of the cuisine served there, and a thumbnail image. Additionally, each restaurant needed a checkbox to indicate if the user selects it for the wheel. A standard list view and array adapter are not enough to do this. Instead, you need a list view with a custom array adapter. This uses a separate XML layout file to define all the widgets that make up a single element of the list. This enabled me to include all the information I needed. I faced another unexpected hurdle when testing the list view. When I was making it, I didn't realize that as soon as an item is scrolled off the screen, any changes made to it are lost. This meant that if a user marked a restaurant for placement on the wheel and scrolled down, their selection was forgotten. This was easy to fix though. I just tracked which ones were checked with an array of booleans. One final thing that could have been difficult was downloading and displaying the thumbnail image for each restaurant. I learned that this isn't necessarily a simple process. Thankfully, there's a library called Picasso that does all the hard work itself. I used it to download the images and display them correctly in the list view. Up next is Spinner Activity. This was also made by me, Caleb Tidwell. This activity places the restaurants the user selected onto a wheel, and the user can use the touchscreen to spin it and randomly choose a winner. The first obstacle I faced with this activity was finding a way to arrange the restaurants in a circle so they were evenly spread around the wheel. The solution to this was using Constraint Layout's Circle Positioning feature. This allows you to constrain a view by specifying the center of the circle, the radius, and the display angle. Another thing I had to learn about to make the spinner was animations in Android. Of course, the spinner actually needs to spin, so this is quite important. In the end, it wasn't very difficult. A rotation animation is what I needed to get it done.
Hello, I am Rachel Rados, and I will be covering the map activity portion of this application. So this activity is going to take a bundle. It's going to contain the address that was selected from the spinner activity, and it's going to then take that string and convert it and then place that location on the map. It's also going to put a marker on the map with a title of the marker of that address. At the bottom of the map, in the bottom right-hand corner, is a link to the Google Maps, which will allow the user to get directions to that location from their current location of their device. So some of the good things that I encountered in developing this activity: Google Play services, particularly the Google Maps and the API for that, does most of the work for you, so a lot of it's integrated. It's just a matter of learning how to call on it to display those particular locations. Now, the downside of it is that Google Play services is required, and I had a little bit of difficulty getting it to work. I had to uninstall Android Studio twice in order to get it to start working for me, and watch several days worth of tutorials to get some of the very specific syntax down to call on some of those particular items inside the map. Another issue that I had personally was that I wasn't able to use a virtual device, but the plus side to that is that I do have a physical device that you can see the application run on, and so my demo of that should be coming up next.